My name is Jacob Elsis, and welcome to the Patchworks Art and History Center. My wife and I opened the center just in January of 2018 with regular hours, although we've been working on this for several years up to this point. This History Center is designed to maintain and preserve the history of this neighborhood of Cabbagetown, once known as Fulton Mill Village. And the reason why this community exists in the first place is because there is a mill that was built in 1881 by actually my great-great-grandfather. So I'm the great-great-grandson of the gentleman who founded this mill. He's also my namesake. His name is Jacob Elsis. When he built the mill, he also built a number of homes for the workers. And as the mill prospered, so did the little community where the mill workers lived. And eventually, this entire area became dependent on the mill and its operations. And we just were hoping that with all of the development and the changes going on in Atlanta, that the story, the 130-year story of this neighborhood can be preserved for future generations.
And I'm Nina Elsis. I'm Jake's wife. I'm also the curator and co-owner of the Patchworks Art and History Center. It's a really neat spot because it is on the main drag of Cabbagetown called Carroll Street, which is also known back in the day in 1881. It was called Factory Street.
And we're here today to talk a little bit about the Cabbagetown Olympics that my wife Nina and I put together just this past year in 2018. And when we came up with the idea, we did it for a couple of different reasons actually. One was to bring the neighborhood together. We really wanted to have more neighbors interact with each other from across the neighborhood. And secondly, we did want to infuse it with some historical elements. So it was very important to us to also have the standard traditional elements of an Olympic Games as part of this event. We had the streets all come together and put their own teams together, and in all we ended up having 12 different teams coming out, almost 150 or so people. We also had torchbearers coming in. The torchbearers were originals, and when I say originals, people who were born and or raised in this neighborhood who have been here for generations. So we had three people in particular, Karen, her son Eli, and Ronnie. They were our official torchbearers, and we all came together in Cabbagetown Park, and we set up a table for the ceremonial opening ceremony. The opening ceremony was basically me talking about how special everybody in the neighborhood was and is and should be for generations to come, at which point I essentially had a toast. We couldn't have fire in Cabbagetown Park. It wasn't allowed. Flames, open flames aren't allowed. So instead I brought fire water, being whiskey. And I opened up a bottle of whiskey that I had obtained and invited the captains in for a shot of this whiskey as our opening ceremonies. And that was, that was the extent, at least this year, of an opening ceremony. So then the games began, and the games themselves were pretty ridiculous. The typical type of field day games that you might have, like in a team building exercise. And in a way, this was a team building exercise for the neighborhood. We had three-legged races, and people came out and they improvised and were very creative during these races. There was quite a bit of cheating.
Yes. We had the Fulton bag race.
Another historic reference, and the reason behind that is because the mill that was established here in 1881, which is the whole reason behind the mill town being here, the mill town now being called Cabbagetown, that mill produced cotton bags. It was big business in the 1800s and up to about the mid-1900s to use cotton bags for shipping goods all around the country by train. We actually have an example or two behind us in our patchwork. So bags like this made of durable cotton would have been produced. This would have been for seed corn. They would also, of course, be designed for flour or potatoes or any other kind of dry good that could be put in a sack. And that's why we decided to have a bag race called the Fulton Bag Race.
Yeah, it just kind of made sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
See, history.
Again, creative cheating. There were a few people that had one leg in the sack and just went down the field. We had the 1914-1915 bowling strike game, and that was a lot of fun. It was, bowling pins of water bottles and a cabbage for the bowling ball. So that was our reference to the 1914 strike that happened here in Cabbagetown.
Some of the games were a little less historically relevant. One event that my darling wife came up with was called
Grab My Balls.
Grab My Balls.
Yes. So the impetus behind that one was people to get into a ring blindfolded, and each team was assigned a color ball. And it was a two-person effort. So there was one person blindfolded in the ring, and then their teammate standing outside the ring shouting at them to grab their balls. And when they found the correct color ball, they were to throw it out of the ring and then continue until all the balls were gathered. Again, there was some creative cheating in which people could see through their blindfold. But I think all in all, it was a pretty successful game of grabbing balls. And who knows, maybe next year there'll be more balls to grab.
So in more recent history, there was a tornado that came through, hit Cabbagetown in 2008. So we decided we would have one game entitled the 2008 Tornado Pantyhose Smackdown, where people would wear pantyhose on their heads with a tennis ball in the foot of the pantyhose, and they would knock down water bottles, and it was very much like a tornado, most definitely. Oh, and then there was the redneck hula hurl.
The redneck hula hurls.
The redneck hula hurl.
So just to reference also, each team had to come up with a game or sponsor a game. So this particular game, the redneck hula hurl, was put on by the Gaskell Street Killers. And basically it was 5 rings taped together, and just have to throw a beanbag into the rings and rack up the highest points.
They were hula hoops, so he took
they were,
hula hoops
okay.
and beanbags.
And yeah, controversy again. Perhaps a child should have won that event.
The MC himself seemed to cheat.
Yeah.
They decided that that was not allowed. The MC, myself, I wasn't allowed to cheat.
Yeah.
I wanted to help the kid.
Yes.
And then we also had the Pop My Cherry event, which, again, we got a little bawdy at times, grab my balls, pop my cherry. But all in the name of good fun. The Pop My Cherry event, where someone would have a balloon tied to his or her backside, and another teammate would run up from behind, and through certain types of compressions, try to pop that person's cherry. Mayhem ensued, as you can see. Not a lot of balloons popped without a little bit of assistance, and once in a while, people started pressing up against each other without the balloons even being present. So I guess you didn't really need the balloons to compete.
That was a funny one. That was a fun one. Yeah. And then the last game was the tug of war.
The reason why we had that game, not only because Reverend David Deschamps had a fire hose, which made that a given, but in 1999, one of the mills caught on fire while they were converting it into these condominiums. And it made national news. It was this tremendous event. I always say event. It was this tremendous fire that captured the nation's attention, in large part because not only was this gigantic structure fully engulfed in flames, but there was a crane operator who was stuck on his crane at the very top of all of this. So there was this inferno below him, and he couldn't escape. The firemen flew in a helicopter. A fireman lowered himself down on a rope, grabbed the crane operator, and pulled him to safety. Daring rescue, and there are famous photos now of that. So yeah, some of these games did reference something that has happened throughout the history of our community.
The Fireman's Tug of War, and that was brought to us by Astoria Street.
Spankers.
The Spankers.
The Spankers.
Yes. And it was just that, it was a fire hose and your typical tug of war game, except for we used the tug of war as a tiebreaker. And it was between Astoria Street Spankers.
No, Astoria won.
Did they win?
Yeah, Gaskell.
Oh, that's correct. It was between Gaskell Street Killers and the Stacks.
Team Stacks.
Team Stacks, that's right. They're the only one
name.
that didn't have a creative name.
Stacks.
So I think we did the tug of war, I don't know, maybe 3 times until, again, the MC interfered. But in this particular instance, it was for a good cause because the MC lives at the Stacks.
I was a little biased.
And the Stacks got second place, so.
Well, but also, there's this ongoing desire. Nina and I live in the Stacks, which is what the old mill is now called. It's a bunch of condominiums and apartments. And so that was converted starting back in the mid-1990s. And there has been, ever since the mill was converted into these residential units, a perceived rift between the condominiums and the mill town itself. All of this is Cabbagetown. Cabbagetown is the mill and the mill town. But a lot of people kind of forget that. And so one thing that we really, really wanted to do, especially during this event, is to create more participation from the Stacks.
And break the barrier.
Break down these walls, both figuratively, I wish literally. There is a fence that surrounds the Stacks at this point. I wish it were gone. But we wanted the Stacks to win in a way because we wanted to kind of generate that excitement, the zeal, and I hope down the road, like for next year, even more participation from people at the Stacks to come out from behind the gate and participate in something like this in the mill town itself. You know, one of the issues with the history of this neighborhood is that the people who lived here were themselves coming from small rural communities, mostly North Georgia and the mountains. When they came here, and they didn't document their own history. That is the part of this neighborhood's history that is most endangered, because a lot of those people have left and a whole new demographic has moved in. So we have taken it upon ourselves to really seek out the stories of the people who once inhabited this neighborhood.
Right. We kind of feel that it's our duty to continue to educate people on Cabbagetown and to tell their stories and to be their voices of those who have lived here or continue to live here, and kind of be their champion.
Advocates.
And we love it, and we love Cabbagetown, and we hope that with the Olympics that we were able to bring those two things together. We were able to bring the community together and education and tell everybody how fantastic it is here.